There's something funny about fog. It doesn't stop you from walking, but it sure as heck blurs the horizon. You can see your own feet, but you're clueless about where you're headed. Sometimes, life feels like that. Waking up, brushing your teeth, clocking in at work, answering text, grabbing whatever's in the fridge, trying to crash. Everything's humming, everything's operational, but there's no sign of where to. Like the days are following a pre-programmed dance, but someone forgot to turn on the music. This fog is quiet. Nobody teaches you how to deal with it. It creeps in right in the middle of your everyday grind, and all of a sudden you realize it's been days, maybe years, that you've been wondering, what's the big deal anyway? But no one brings that up at Thanksgiving dinner. Nobody posts on Instagram, "Woke up today questioning the very fabric of existence." We play it cool, with being productive, with distractions, with promises that someday all of this will make sense. But what if it doesn't? It's not easy to admit, but I've also asked myself if I'm actually going somewhere or just running in circles, really well disguised. And as crazy as it sounds, neuroscience and modern philosophy are starting to converge on an uncomfortable idea. Maybe life doesn't come with a built-in meaning. Maybe it's like a mirror. It only reflects what we project onto it. If that's true, then we're all navigating with compasses we drew ourselves. And maybe that's why sometimes they point to nowhere. This whole thing about looking for meaning always feels urgent, like life's a timed exam and we forgot our pencils. And every time someone asks me, "What's your purpose?" I feel like answering with another question, "What if I don't know?" In fact, I'll confess something that might be true for you too. I go through phases where everything seems to click. Work, relationships, even the little routines. And, out of nowhere, that thread that held it all together unravels. And what was crystal clear turns into fog again. Sometimes I feel like someone who parachuted into a movie that's already started. Everyone else seems to have gotten the memo, except me. Some folks talk about callings, soul missions, spiritual paths, and here I am trying to figure out if I had breakfast out of habit or because I was actually hungry. And what throws me off the most is that this question, what's the meaning of life, seems to follow us like a shadow. Even when we ignore it, it's still there, lurking. And some days it weighs us down. Other times it pulses like a reminder that there's something more. But what more is that? Is the meaning of life something we find lying around, like spare change in a coat pocket? Or does it have to be built, piece by piece, with dirty hands, tired eyes, and a heart beating in the dark? I've been thinking a lot about this, especially because we're living in a time when everything is screaming for purpose. Self-help books promise the big why. Coaches sell the formula. And social media stacks motivational quotes like they're treasure maps. But what if the meaning of life isn't a destination? What if it's a process? A question we carry in our pocket, even when we don't have an answer. Because, honestly, some days, just getting out of bed is an act of existential defiance. And maybe that in itself is full of meaning. If you also feel like this sometimes, like you're in a rudderless boat with a cloudy sky and choppy seas, know that you're not alone. Maybe there really isn't a straight line. Maybe we have to get a little lost to be able to find anything at all. And it was in this tangle of doubts that I went looking for answers where they usually don't come ready-made. In philosophy, in psychology, and even in accounts from people who stared death in the face and came back to tell the tale. There comes a point when the question, "What's the meaning of life?" stops being a philosophical exercise and starts to hurt. Literally. The body feels it. The chest tightens. Sleep vanishes. The soul seems to meow softly in the middle of the night, like a cat trapped in a dark room. That's what Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Auschwitz survivor, called existential vacuum, a state of deep apathy in which a person feels neither pleasure nor pain, only a void, like something is missing, but you don't know what. Frankl said that this emptiness was one of the great evils of our time. Not surprisingly, we've never been so surrounded by stimuli, distractions, consumption, and at the same time, so distressed inside. While Freud talked about the pursuit of pleasure and Adler about the pursuit of power, Frankl believed that the most fundamental motivation of human beings was the search for meaning. And when that meaning doesn't appear, the soul gets sick. But what is this thing called meaning? I've been thinking a lot about this, especially because we're living in a time when everything is screaming for purpose. Self-help books promise the big why. Coaches sell the formula. And social media stacks motivational quotes like they're treasure maps. But what if the meaning of life isn't a destination? What if it's a process? A question we carry in our pocket, even when we don't have an answer? Because, honestly, some days, just getting out of bed is an act of existential defiance. And maybe that in itself is full of meaning. If you also feel like this sometimes, like you're in a rudderless boat with a cloudy sky and choppy seas, know that you're not alone. Maybe there really isn't a straight line. Maybe we have to get a little lost to be able to find anything at all.
And it was in this tangle of doubts that I went looking for answers where they usually don't come ready-made.
In philosophy, in psychology, and even in accounts from people who stared death in the face and came back to tell the tale. There comes a point when the question, "What's the meaning of life?" stops being a philosophical exercise and starts to hurt, literally. The body feels it. The chest tightens. Sleep vanishes. The soul seems to meow softly in the middle of the night, like a cat trapped in a dark room. That's what Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Auschwitz survivor, called existential vacuum. A state of deep apathy in which a person feels neither pleasure nor pain, only a void, like something is missing, but you don't know what. Frankl said that this emptiness was one of the great evils of our time. Not surprisingly, we've never been so surrounded by stimuli, distractions, consumption, and at the same time so distressed inside. While Freud talked about the pursuit of pleasure, and Adler about the pursuit of power, Frankl believed that the most fundamental motivation of human beings was the search for meaning. And when that meaning doesn't appear, the soul gets sick. But what is this thing called meaning? Frankl didn't say that there is a single universal one. On the contrary, he believed that each person has their own answer, and that it can change throughout life. Meaning, for him, is not a theory, it is a lived experience. It's not a concept, it's a calling that only you hear. And the most impressive thing is that he discovered this in the most inhumane place possible, a concentration camp. While he watched men die from hunger, cold, and violence, he noticed something strange. Those who had a why, even if it was imagining seeing their wife again, finishing a book, or simply bearing witness to the experience, were able to resist more than those who had lost all hope. Frankl wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how," quoting Nietzsche. That phrase has become a silent mantra for me, not because it offers an easy way out, but because it returns the question with more depth. What is your why today? Maybe you're waiting for a big revelation, an epic purpose. But Frankl said that meaning can be found in 3 simple places. In creation, doing something that only you can do, like writing, cooking, caring. In experience, living something, loving someone, letting yourself be touched by the beauty of the world.
In attitude, choosing how you react to the pain you cannot change. It's not about changing the whole world, it's about finding a fixed point within the chaos. And that made me think of a metaphor. Living is like rowing on a lake covered in fog. You can't see the shore. But sometimes, a bird's song or a reflection in the water gives you a direction. And even if you don't know where you're going yet, continuing to row is already a way to resist giving up.
I remember one night when I was completely lost. Everything seemed dull, meaningless, aimless. And then a friend sent me a short message, one of those unassuming ones. "You listen to me like no one else." That broke me down. It reminded me that even without knowing where to go, I could still be useful. And that, at that moment, was enough. The meaning of life sometimes fits in a gesture, in a choice to continue, in a silent listen. So, what if that's it? What if life doesn't have a prefabricated, universal meaning, illuminated by cosmic spotlights and wrapped in spiritual gift paper? What if the meaning of life isn't an answer, but a relationship? A type of silent bond that we create with what touches us, with what moves us, even if it hurts, even if it has no name. Maybe the big mistake isn't in not knowing the meaning, but in thinking that we should know it all the time, that life needs to be linear, epic, grandiose, that everything has to make sense now, already, immediately, like an app that delivers purpose on demand. Frankl said that meaning doesn't impose itself, it is discovered, or rather, it is revealed, slowly, when you pay attention, when you allow yourself to live with openness. Pain, for example. Some people say that it gets in the way of the meaning of life. But what if it's the opposite? What if it is precisely in the encounter with pain that we realize we are alive, needed, capable of feeling something real? What if the feeling of being lost isn't a sign of failure, but that we are alive enough to question? Because if you're asking yourself all of this, it's a sign that you haven't numbed yourself yet. You still feel. And feeling, as difficult as it may be, is the beginning of any construction of meaning. I began to realize that the meaning of life, at least for me, is not something fixed. It's more like background music that changes tone according to the scene. Some days it hides in a hug, others in a silly laugh. Sometimes it's in not giving up. Other times, it's nowhere to be found, and that's okay. On those days, what saves you isn't certainty. It's the courage to continue even without it. You don't need to have all the answers now. Maybe you don't even need to have them ever. You just need to be present. Breathe. Listen. Look around with a little more tenderness. Life doesn't need to make sense to be valuable. It just needs to be felt. If all of this resonated with you, I want to recommend a book that isn't just reading, it's company. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Don't expect a self-help manual. Frankl wrote this book after surviving Nazi concentration camps where he lost his family, his freedom, and almost his own identity. And even there, in the most inhumane place possible, he found a type of meaning that didn't depend on the circumstances, but on the attitude towards them. The reading is short, but each page weighs like a confession. It is a work that does not answer, but reveals. One of those that you read with a pencil in your hand and a lump in your throat. And if you like cinema, a film that converses with this idea of creating meaning even in the absurd is Life is Beautiful by Roberto Benigni. A father who transforms a concentration camp into a kind of game to protect his son from the cruelty of the world. A visceral reminder that meaning can be born of love, even within tragedy. These works don't give you ready-made answers, but they offer a new way of looking. And that, sometimes, is all we need. If you've made it this far, first, thank you, really. Making videos like this is like writing a letter without knowing if there will be a reply. And when you watch to the end, comment, share, it's like saying, hey, I'm trying to figure all this out too. And now I ask you with all affection and curiosity, what is your why today? Not the prettiest, nor the deepest. Just what is keeping you on your feet right now. Maybe it's someone. Maybe it's a dream. Maybe it's the simple desire to see how the story continues. Write in the comments. We read everything. And I say we because this community is growing and it's beautiful. A bunch of sensitive, restless people who think too much, feel too much, and still continue. If you want to support this channel and make more videos like this possible, consider becoming a member. Any help, however small it may seem, is already huge. And if this did you good, send it to someone you love. Who knows? You might become the point of meaning in another person's day. We'll see each other in the next video. And until then, even in the middle of the fog, keep rowing.